If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you are watching us from. We continue. The fine rain of London drummed on the windows of the corporate office in the heart of the capital, creating a monotonous melody that accompanied the last words of the meeting. Roderick Alistair adjusted his Italian tie as he listened to the director end the meeting earlier than expected. An unexpected agreement had been reached, and everyone could return home before dinner. He mentally thanked his luck, picked up his leather briefcase and headed towards the lift, thinking of his daughter waiting for him at home. The mansion in Belgravia was imposing, with its wrought-iron gates and impeccable gardens that reflected years of success dedicated to the business world. Roderick had built an empire in the technology sector, transforming a small startup into one of the most respected companies in the country. But all that success came at a price he was still learning to calculate. As he drove through the main gate, he noticed that the living room lights were on, casting long shadows on the silk curtains. He parked the car in the garage and walked towards the entrance, planning to surprise little Sophie with his early arrival. The 8-year-old girl loved it when he came home early, and they would always rush together to watch her favorite cartoons before dinner. But it was Roderick who received the surprise. Before he even reached the front door, a sound cut through the damp London night air. It was crying. Not a common child's cry of a tantrum or complaining about something trivial. It was a desperate cry, laden with fear and pain, that instantly chilled his heart. He immediately recognized his daughter's voice. He quickened, his steps feeling adrenaline course through his veins. Before he could reach the doorknob, another sound joined Sophie's cries. It was a female voice, loud and harsh, uttering words he would never have imagined hearing inside his own home. "You're a burden. Do you understand that? A load no one should have to carry." The voice of Patricia, his wife of 2 years, echoed through the mansion with a cruelty that brutally contrasted with the delicate and attentive woman he knew, or thought he knew. "Look what you've done. You've ruined the Persian rug that cost a fortune. You useless girl." Roderick pushed the door open forcefully, making it bang against the wall. The scene that presented itself before him was something that would be etched in his memory forever. Sophie was sprawled on the marble floor of the living room, her thin legs trembling, surrounded by shards of glass and a puddle of water. Her pink crutches, customized with butterfly designs that she loved so much, were scattered far from her reach. The girl tried to reach them, stretching out her arms as tears streamed down her pale face. And there, standing before the child, was Patricia, the woman he had met at a charity event 3 years ago, who had charmed him with her apparent kindness, who had sworn to care for Sophie as if she were her own daughter. But the Patricia he saw now was someone completely different. Her face was distorted in an expression of pure contempt, her eyes gleaming with a rage that seemed to come from a very deep and dark place. "Patricia!" Roderick's voice came out like thunder. She turned quickly, and for a fraction of a second he saw panic cross her face. But then, almost instantly, the mask returned. Her face softened, her eyes widened in an expression of innocent surprise, and she placed a hand on her chest as if she had been the one startled. "Roderick, you're home early. I was just—" she began, but he didn't let her finish. He walked past her without a word and knelt beside Sophie, taking the girl into his arms with extreme care. The little one clung to him as if he were a lifeline in a stormy ocean, sobbing against his shoulder. It was then that he saw. Red marks circled Sophie's delicate wrists. They were not marks from an accidental fall. They were finger marks, fingers that had held tightly, causing pain to a child who already faced so many daily challenges. "Sophie, my love, look at Daddy," he said softly, brushing her brown hair from her face. "Can you tell me what happened?" The girl opened her mouth, but only more sobs came out. Her big, frightened eyes quickly darted to Patricia and then back to her father, laden with a fear that broke Roderick's heart into pieces. "It was an accident, Roderick," Patricia intervened quickly, her voice now soft and concerned. "Sophie was trying to get water. By herself, even after I told her to wait. She dropped the glass and I just tried to help her up, but she got nervous and—" "Lie." The word came softly from Sophie's mouth, almost a whisper, but clear enough to be heard. Patricia's eyes widened, and Roderick saw something dangerous flash in them for an instant before she regained her composure. "Sophie, dear, you're confused. You must have hit your head when you fell," Patricia said, approaching. "Don't come near her," Roderick ordered, his voice low but charged with an authority that brooked no argument. He stood up, still, holding Sophie in his arms, and finally faced the woman who had shared his home for 2 years. "Roderick, you're overreacting. Children fall, they get hurt, especially children who insist on doing things alone when they should ask for help," Patricia argued. But there was a tension in her posture, a rigidity that didn't match her soft words. "I didn't fall," Sophie murmured against her father's shoulder. "She pushed me." The silence that followed was deafening. Roderick felt his daughter tremble in his arms, and at that moment, something inside him broke and rearranged itself in a completely different way. All the little things he had ignored in recent months began to make sense. The times he came home and found Sophie quieter than usual. The furtive glances she cast at Patricia. The nights the girl appeared in his room saying she had had nightmares, but could never describe what they were about. "Go up to your room, Sophie," he said gently. "I'll get your crutches and come up to tend to those scrapes, okay?" "Don't leave me alone with her," Sophie whispered, clutching her father's shirt collar. "I never will," he promised, and carried the girl to the bottom of the stairs. He called Marion, the housekeeper who had worked with them for years, and who quickly appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dishcloth. "Marion, please take Sophie to her room and stay with her. Don't let anyone in but me. Understood?" No one. Marion was an experienced woman who had raised 4 children and knew Roderick from before he married Patricia. She looked at the marks on Sophie's wrists, then at Roderick's tense face, and nodded gravely. "Leave it to me, Mr. Alistair. I'll take care of her." When Marion went upstairs with Sophie in her arms, Roderick turned slowly to Patricia. The woman was standing in the same spot, watching the scene with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't exactly concern, it wasn't regret, it was something closer to irritation. "Roderick, we need to talk calmly," she began, approaching him with calculated steps. "Sophie is a difficult child. You know that. She still doesn't fully accept me, and sometimes she invents stories to get attention. It's natural after losing her mother so young." "No," he interrupted her, his voice sharp as a blade. "Don't you dare mention Helen now, and don't try to manipulate the situation." Patricia stopped, frowning slightly. "Manipulate? Roderick, I'm your wife. I'm trying to build a family here, but you need to understand that Sophie needs boundaries, discipline." "Discipline?" He took a step towards her, and Patricia, for the first time, took a step back. "You call leaving marks on an 8-year-old child's wrists discipline? Pushing her? Calling her a burden? Useless?" "You heard." The question escaped Patricia's lips before she could stop herself, and Roderick saw the exact moment she realized her mistake. There was no denial. There was no surprise. Just the confirmation that it was all real. "I heard every word," he replied, his voice dangerously calm. "And now I need to know how long this has been going on." Patricia ran a hand through her impeccably styled blonde hair, and when she looked at him again, something had changed in her expression. The mask of a dedicated wife was cracking, revealing something harder underneath. "Do you really want to know, Roderick? Do you want to know how exhausting it is to pretend I care about that child? That it's easy to take care of a girl who needs constant attention, who can barely walk, on her own, who is always complaining, always needing something?" Every word was like a slap in the face. Roderick opened his mouth to reply, but she continued, the words flowing out in a torrent that seemed to have been dammed up for a long time. "Do you think it's easy to live in Helen's shadow? Saint Helen, the perfect wife who left everything organized, who was adored by everyone, who even in death can't leave your life?" Patricia laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "And that girl is her copy. Always looking at me with those judging eyes, always playing the victim, always reminding you that I'll never be the mother she lost." "Sophie is 8 years old," Roderick said, his voice trembling with contained rage. "She's a child who needs crutches to walk, who lost her mother only 3 years ago, and you should protect her, not hurt her." "Protect her?" Patricia let out a bitter laugh. "Roderick, wake up. You brought me into this house to take care of her, but deep down, you wanted someone to fill the void Helen left, and guess what? I'm not her, I never will be." "You're right," he said calmly. "You'll never be a tenth of the person Helen was, and now I want you to pack your things and get out of my house." The silence that followed was heavy. Patricia stared at him as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "What?" "You heard me perfectly. I want you out of here. Now." Patricia took a few faltering steps, processing the words. Then, to Roderick's surprise, she began to laugh. It was a different laugh now, more controlled, almost cold. "You think it's that simple? To send me away as if I were just any maid? You're not welcome here, you hurt my daughter. That's more than enough reason." "Your daughter," she repeated, placing strange emphasis on the words. "Funny you say that. Are you so sure of everything you think you know, Roderick?" There was something in the way she said that which sent a chill down his spine, but he wasn't going to be intimidated or distracted. "Go, Patricia. Don't make me call security." "Ah, security," she smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. Of course, the great Roderick Alistair with his army of security guards, his cameras, his control over everything. But you know what's funny? You don't control half of what you think you control. She walked towards the stairs, but stopped on the first step and turned to him. "I'll pack my things. But this isn't over, Roderick. Far from it. You'll regret kicking me out of here. You'll regret choosing that child over me. And when you're ready to hear the truth, the real truth about Helen, about Sophie, about everything you think you know." She paused dramatically. "You'll come looking for me, and then it might be too late." With those words, she went upstairs, leaving. Roderick alone in the living room, surrounded by the shards of glass and the questions that were beginning to multiply in his mind. He took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few minutes. The house that had always seemed a refuge now felt strange, as if he were seeing it for the first time. How many other times had Sophie suffered while he was at work? How many tears had she cried alone? And what did Patricia mean by those enigmatic words about Helen and Sophie? Marion came down the stairs slowly, interrupting his thoughts. "The girl is in her room, Mr. Alistair. I cleaned her scratches. Nothing serious, thank God, but she's asking for you." "Thank you, Marion. I'll go up now. Patricia will be down in a few minutes with her bags. Please make sure she leaves the house. And then I'd like to talk to you." Marion nodded, understanding. "I've seen a lot over the years, Mr. Alistair, a lot that wasn't my place to speak about. But now I think it's time for some truths to come to light." Before Roderick could ask what she meant, the sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Patricia came down with a large suitcase, wearing an expensive coat and sunglasses even though it was night. She walked past them without a word, her head held high, her heels echoing on the marble. At the door, she stopped and looked back one last time. "You'll come looking for me, Roderick, and when that happens, I hope you're prepared to discover that your perfect life with Helen was never what you thought it was." And then she left, leaving only the echo of her words and the expensive perfume she always wore floating in the air. Roderick remained motionless for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. But then he remembered Sophie, alone in her room, probably scared and confused. He needed to be strong for her. He needed to discover the truth, all of it. But above all, he needed to protect his daughter. He went upstairs with determination, but with a heavy heart. As he pushed open Sophie's bedroom door, he found the girl sitting on the bed, hugging her favorite stuffed rabbit. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears again. "Daddy, is she gone?" "Yes," he confirmed, sitting on the bed beside her and wrapping her in a careful embrace. "And she won't be back." "Promise?" Her voice was so small, so fragile. "I promise." He kissed the top of her head. "Sophie, I need you to be very brave now and tell me everything. How long has this been happening?" The girl was quiet for a moment, biting her lower lip the same way Helen used to do when she was nervous. It was such a familiar gesture that it made Roderick's heart ache. "Since the beginning," she finally whispered. "Since she came to live here. At first it was just, she wouldn't talk to me when you weren't around. She pretended I didn't exist. Then she started saying bad things about Mummy. She said Mummy had been weak, that she had left me as a burden to you." Roderick felt the anger welling up inside him again, but forced himself to remain calm. Sophie needed him calm now. "And you never told me because I was scared," she admitted, tears now streaming freely. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me. I was scared you loved her more than me. She always said that if I told, you would send me away, that I was too difficult, that no one would want to take care of a girl who can't even walk properly." Every word was like a stab. Roderick held his daughter tighter against his chest, wishing he could go back in time and notice the signs that now seemed so obvious. "Sophie, my love, look at me," he said, gently pulling her back so he could look into her eyes. "Nothing. Are you listening to me? Nothing in this world is more important to me than you. You are not a burden. You are my daughter, my treasure, the most precious thing I have. And I am so sorry for not realizing what was happening." "You didn't know," she said, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "She was very good at pretending when you were around. But I should have noticed. I should have paid more attention." He sighed deeply. "Sophie, Patricia said some strange things before she left. Things about your mother, about secrets. Did you hear anything? See anything you shouldn't have?" The girl was quiet for a moment, her big eyes fixed on her father. Then slowly she nodded. "I heard a lot of things, Daddy. She thought I was sleeping, or that I wasn't paying attention because I spend a lot of time playing alone in my room. But I heard, and I saw." "What did you see, honey?" Sophie took a deep breath, as if preparing to tell him something very important. "She used to mess with your things, in your office. When you traveled, she would go in there and spend hours looking for documents, looking at papers, taking pictures of things with her phone. Once she was on the phone and said a different name. It wasn't Patricia, it was Letitia Davies. And she was talking to someone about money, a lot of money, about waiting for the right moment." Roderick felt a chill run down his spine. "When was this?" "A few months ago. And there was something else." Sophie hesitated, biting her lip again. "She talked about Mummy, bad things. She said Mummy had been naive, that she had been easy. I didn't quite understand what she meant, but the way she talked, it was like she knew Mummy much more than she told you." The pieces began to fall into place in Roderick's mind, forming a disturbing puzzle. Patricia had always said she only knew Helen superficially at a few social events. But what if that was a lie? What if there was much more behind the way she had appeared in his life? "Sophie, you were very brave to tell me all this," he said, kissing her forehead. "And now I'm going to find out the truth, all of it. But I need you to stay safe here, with Marion, while I sort some things out, okay?" She nodded but held his hand tightly. "Daddy, be careful. She's dangerous. I feel it." The intuition of an 8-year-old child echoed exactly what Roderick was beginning to feel. Patricia was not just a cruel stepmother. Something much darker was going on, something that involved Helen, secrets from the past, and a plan he couldn't yet fully see. But he was going to find out. No matter how long it took or how much it hurt, he was going to protect Sophie, and he was going to unearth all the secrets Patricia had buried. The night in, London remained rainy outside, but inside the mansion a much bigger storm was just beginning. The first rays of sun began to pierce through the office curtains when Roderick finally lifted his head from the desk. He had spent the entire night there, surrounded by documents, old photos, and frantic notes he made, as he tried to piece together a puzzle that became more complex with each passing hour. After putting Sophie to bed the night before, he had called Marion for a conversation that lasted until almost midnight. The housekeeper, with her unwavering loyalty to the family, had finally felt free to tell everything she had observed over the past 2 years, and her revelations were disturbing. Patricia always acted strangely when Roderick wasn't home. She spent hours locked in his office, went out at unusual times without explanation, and received phone calls that left her tense and irritated. And more importantly, she treated Sophie with a calculated coldness that bordered on cruelty, even when she tried to disguise it in front of other staff. Marion also recounted that she had caught Patricia a few times coming out of Roderick's room with documents she clearly shouldn't have been handling. When questioned, she always had a ready excuse, something about organizing papers or looking for something Roderick had asked for. But Marion knew her boss well, and knew those excuses made no sense. Now, as day broke over London, Roderick looked at his wedding photo with Helen that he kept on his desk. She smiled radiantly in that image, wearing a simple but elegant dress, her brown hair loose in the wind. It was a photo taken in a spontaneous moment, very different from official photos. Helen never liked ostentation even after he started prospering in business. She had passed away 3 years ago, a victim of a health condition that deteriorated rapidly. Roderick remembered how everything happened too quickly. Helen was fine. Then she started feeling weakness, dizziness, inexplicable nausea. Doctors performed various tests, but never reached a definitive diagnosis. When they finally discovered something was seriously wrong, it was already too late. Within months, she was so fragile, she could barely get out of bed. And throughout that terrible period, Patricia was there. Or rather, a woman who introduced herself as Isabella Shaw, a friend Helen had met in a support group. Roderick vaguely remembered her visiting Helen in her last months, bringing special teas, vitamins, talking softly with his wife, while he worked to pay for the increasingly expensive and desperate treatments. It was only a few months after Helen's passing that he re-encountered that woman at a charity event. But she was different. Her hair was lighter, her style of dress was different, and when she introduced herself, she used the name Patricia. He didn't make the connection immediately. The pain was still too raw, and he could barely remember those hazy days in the hospital and the last moments with Helen. Patricia was charming, interested, attentive, always saying the right things at the right time. She won him over gradually, respecting his grief, showing understanding towards Sophie, offering help without being intrusive. Or at least that's how it seemed at the time. Now, looking back with new eyes, Roderick realized how overly convenient that meeting had been. How Patricia seemed to know exactly what to say, as if she knew him much better than a newcomer should. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Marion, bringing fresh coffee and a worried look. "Mr. Alistair, you haven't slept at all. You need to rest." "I can't, Marion. Not until I understand what's happening." He accepted the cup of coffee and took a long sip. "I need to talk to someone who can help me investigate Patricia. I need to know who she really is." "Have you thought about talking to that security fellow, Philip? He's always been very competent." Roderick nodded. Philip Carter was the head of security for the company and also handled the family's personal security. A former police officer, discreet and extremely efficient. If there was anyone who could help him unearth Patricia's past without causing a fuss, it was him. "Good idea, I'll call him now. And Marion, how is Sophie?" "Still sleeping. The poor dear stayed up late messing with her tablet. She must be exhausted." Roderick frowned. Sophie was obsessed with that tablet. Helen had given it to her shortly before she passed, saying it was important for the girl to learn about technology and keep her mind occupied. He had always encouraged this, thinking it was good for her development, but now he wondered what exactly Sophie spent so much time doing on that device. He picked up his phone and called Philip. The man answered on the second ring, despite it being only 6 in the morning. "Mr. Alistair, is everything all right?" "Philip, I need your help. Something urgent. Can you come over?" "I'm on my way." 40 minutes later, Philip was sitting in Roderick's office, listening intently as the businessman recounted everything that had happened the previous night and shared the suspicions that were forming in his mind. Philip was a man in his early 40s, with short-cropped greying hair, an athletic build, and eyes that missed no detail. He had worked on difficult cases during his years in the police, forced before retiring and taking the job with Roderick. "I understand the situation," Philip said when Roderick finished, "and I agree that something is very wrong here. The behavior you described isn't that of a frustrated stepmother. It's someone executing a plan. That's exactly what I think. And I have a feeling that Helen might have discovered something before she passed. She was trying to tell me something in her last days, but I was so focused on finding treatments, on saving her, that I didn't pay enough attention. You mentioned that Patricia was visiting Helen during her illness, but using another name. That is extremely suspicious. Philip made some notes in a small notebook. I'll start by investigating Patricia's past. I'll check documents, work history, family ties, everything. And I'll also look for any Isabella Shaw who might have a connection to hospitals or support groups. How long do you think it will take? Depends on what I find. If she changed her identity or is hiding something serious, it could take a few days. But I'll work fast. And Mr. Alistair, in the meantime, I suggest you review all important documents, account passwords, safe access. If she was really looking for something here, we need to know what it was. Roderick agreed, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. After Philip left, he began to systematically review all the files in the office, checking what might have been tampered with or photographed. It was then that he remembered the safe deposit box. There was a bank safe deposit box that he and Helen kept together, where they stored important documents, family jewelry, and some sentimental items. Roderick hadn't opened that safe deposit box since Helen's funeral. It was too painful, laden with memories he wasn't yet ready to face. But perhaps that was exactly where Helen had left something, some clue, some explanation for the strange things that were happening. He was considering going to the bank that very morning when Sophie appeared at the office door, still in her pajamas, dragging her colourful crutches. Her hair was messy from sleep and she held her tablet against her chest. "Daddy, didn't you sleep?" "Good morning, my love." "Not much. I was working." He opened his arms and she came to him, letting him pick her up. "How are you feeling?" "Better. I didn't have nightmares." She rested, her head on his shoulder. "Daddy, I need to show you something." "What is it?" Sophie picked up the tablet and started tapping on it with agile fingers. "Remember I said she used to mess with your things? Well, I started recording. Not every time, but when I could." Roderick's eyes widened. "Sophie, you have recordings of her?" The girl nodded, and an expression of pride mixed with nervousness crossed her face. "Mummy taught me how to use the tablet for many things. She said I was very smart and that I should always pay attention to things around me. So I paid attention, and I recorded." She opened a hidden, password-protected folder on the tablet, revealing several audio files and even some short videos. Roderick felt a mixture of astonishment and pride at his daughter's intelligence and courage. "This one," Sophie said, opening one of the most recent audio files. "It's from 3 weeks ago. Listen." Patricia's voice filled the office, cold and calculated, talking on the phone with someone. Roderick recognized her London accent, but there was something different in the tone, harder, more real than the soft voice she always used with him. "Everything is going as planned? Yes, I have access to almost everything. The main documents are in the bank safe deposit box, but I'll find out where it is and how to access it." "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's so busy with business that he barely notices what's happening inside his own home. The girl is a problem, but I'll solve that too. It's only a matter of time." There was a pause, and then she continued. "You don't understand. I've spent 3 years preparing this. 3 years since I removed her from the way. I'm not giving up now, and I'm so close. The money is mine by right. After everything I've been through, everything I've sacrificed, I deserve it." The recording continued, but Roderick had stopped breathing. Those words echoed in his mind like bombs exploding one after another. "Removed her from the way. 3 years since I removed her from the way." "Sophie," he said, his voice hoarse, "do you understand what she's saying here?" The girl looked at him with those big eyes, too serious for an 8-year-old. "I think she's talking about Mummy. I think she did something to Mummy." The child's words confirmed the horrible thought that was forming in Roderick's mind. Helen hadn't simply fallen ill. It had been something deliberate, something that Patricia, or whatever her real name was, had done. He felt nausea rising in his throat, but forced himself to remain calm. Sophie was looking at him, frightened by his reaction, and he couldn't crumble now, not when she needed him strong. "Are there more recordings?" he asked. "Yes, several. Some I didn't quite understand, but I thought you'd want to hear them." They spent the next hour listening to the recordings. Some were just fragments of conversations, others were longer and more revealing. Patricia spoke with someone she called Dr. Campbell, discussing values, deadlines, calculated risks. She mentioned Helen's documents, inheritances, bank accounts. She mentioned the need to have full access to the assets before anyone started asking questions. And in one of the most disturbing recordings, she spoke about Sophie in a way that made Roderick's blood run cold. "The girl is smarter than she looks. She's always watching, always quiet in her corner. I'll have to be more careful, or create a situation where an accident seems natural. With her condition, no one would find it too strange." Children with mobility difficulties fall all the time. Roderick abruptly turned off the recording, feeling physically ill. That woman was planning to harm Sophie. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It was something much worse. "Daddy, are you okay?" Sophie asked, touching his face with her small hand. "I am, honey. You were incredibly brave to record all this. Braver than any child should ever need to be." He kissed her forehead. "Now I need you to give me this tablet so I can show all this to Philip and the right people, okay?" She hesitated for a moment, clutching the tablet to her chest. It was clearly something precious to her, a gift from her mother and her means of protection. But then, slowly, she handed it to her father. "Are you going to make her pay for what she did to Mummy?" The question was simple, but laden with deep pain. Roderick looked at his daughter, at those eyes that so reminded him of Helen, and made a promise. "I will do everything in my power to uncover the truth and ensure that justice is served. Your mother deserves that, and you deserve to live without fear." At that moment, Roderick's phone rang. It was Philip. "Mr. Alistair, I need you to come to my office. I found something you need to see personally. I'm on my way." He took Sophie to her room and asked Marion to stay with her, then quickly left for Philip's office, which was in a commercial building on Oxford Street. London traffic was as intense as ever, but Roderick barely noticed, lost in disturbing thoughts about everything he had discovered. In Philip's office, he found the former police officer with a grave expression, surrounded by papers, and a computer screen showing various documents. "What did you find?" Roderick asked without preamble. "Sit down," Philip said, indicating a chair. "This is going to be difficult to hear." Roderick sat down, bracing himself for the worst. "Patricia doesn't exist, or rather she does, but it's a relatively new identity, created about 4 years ago. Before that, there was a Letitia Davies who worked as a nurse in 3 different hospitals across the UK. And in each of those hospitals, there were suspicious deaths. Nothing that could be proven, but enough for her to be quietly dismissed from all 3 institutions." Roderick felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. "Nurse. She had access to medications to vulnerable patients." "Exactly. And there's more. I found records that an Isabella Shaw, using false documents, attended support groups for families of patients with serious conditions during the same periods. It's likely she used these groups to identify targets, vulnerable people with wealthy families." "Helen," Roderick whispered. "She met Helen in a support group. My God." Philip continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Alistair, based on what I found and what you told me, there's a very real possibility that Mrs. Helen's deteriorating health was not natural. It's possible that Letitia, or Patricia, or whatever her real name is, administered something that caused or accelerated her condition." The words confirmed what Roderick was already beginning to suspect, but hearing them aloud was like being punched in the stomach. He stood up abruptly, beginning to pace back and forth in the room. "Helen was trying to tell me something. In the last few days before she passed, she was agitated, trying to speak, but she was so weak. And I, like an idiot, remained focused only on finding doctors, treatments, anything that could save her. I didn't listen to what she was trying to tell me. You couldn't have known. You were doing the best you could in an impossible situation. But I should have noticed. I should have questioned more, investigated more." Roderick stopped by the window, looking out at the city below without really seeing it. That woman took Helen from me, from Sophie, and then had the audacity to enter my life, pretend she loved me, marry me. All for what, Philip? Money. Money is a powerful motivator, and you are a very wealthy man, Mr. Alistair. For someone willing to go so far, it must seem worth it. Roderick took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. What do we do now? Is this information you found enough for the authorities? It's circumstantial. We need more concrete proof. Ideally, she would confess, or we would have physical evidence of what was administered to Mrs. Helen. But there's a bigger problem now. What? Letitia Davies disappeared about a year ago. No record of residence, no movement in bank accounts linked to that name. It's as if she was erased. And if Patricia was just a temporary identity, she may already be planning to disappear again and assume a new identity elsewhere. Roderick closed his eyes, feeling frustration grow. She mentioned something about having documents that could incriminate me. She might be planning to blackmail me. Probably. It's a common tactic. Create false evidence, distort real facts, all to gain leverage. Philip got up and went to a small coffee maker in the corner of the room. But Mr. Alistair, there's something you need to consider. If everything we suspect is true, this woman is extremely dangerous. She won't just accept being exposed and arrested, she'll fight and she might do desperate things. Sophie is in danger. Sophie has always been in danger. But now that Patricia knows she's been expelled and that you're suspicious, the risk has increased. She might try something drastic. Roderick immediately grabbed his phone and called Marion. Marion, is everything all right there? Yes, Mr. Alistair, Sophie is here in her room with me drawing. Good. Don't let her out of your sight for a second. I'm arranging additional security for the house. And Marion, if Patricia shows up there, don't let her in under any circumstances, and call me immediately. After hanging up, he turned to Philip. I need you to put your best men at my house. I want 24-hour security, and I need to find out where Patricia is now. I'm already tracking her. She checked into a hotel in South London a few hours ago. I have someone watching her. Excellent. Now I need to go to the bank. Helen had a safe deposit box there, and I have a feeling there might be something important stored. Do you want me to go with you? No, I need you to continue investigating. The more information we can get about her past, the better, but keep me informed of any moves she makes. On the way to the bank, Roderick received a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his heart almost stopped. You'll want to open that safe deposit box you've been avoiding so much, Roderick. Helen left something very important there, something that can change everything you think you know. And when you discover the truth, you'll understand that we are connected in ways you can't even imagine. The clock is ticking. The message had no signature, but he knew exactly who had sent it. Patricia was monitoring his movements, knew his plans, and was one step ahead. But what did she mean by that enigmatic message? What truth had Helen left in the safe deposit box? He sped up, feeling the urgency grow within him. Whatever Helen had kept, it was time to find out. It was time to face the past and all the truths he had avoided for so long. The bank was busy when he arrived, but Roderick managed quick access to the safe deposit box area. The manager, a middle-aged woman who had known the family for years, accompanied him to the private room where his safe deposit box was kept. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Alistair, she said gently as she guided him. Mrs. Helen was a wonderful woman. She was, Roderick agreed, his voice laden with emotion. Thank you very much. Alone in the small room, he looked at the metallic safe deposit box before him. His hands trembled slightly as he typed the combination that only he and Helen knew. Or at least, that's what he thought. Now he wasn't sure of anything anymore. The safe deposit box opened with a soft click. Inside were jewelry boxes, some property documents, certificates, and at the bottom a large brown leather folder that he didn't remember putting there. With a pounding heart, Roderick picked up the folder and opened it. Inside were documents, photos, handwritten notes in Helen's hand, and a sealed envelope with his name written on the front. He picked up the envelope with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a letter, several pages written by the woman he had loved. My dearest Roderick, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I have passed away and you have finally had the courage to open our safe deposit box. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I still had time. But I was so weak and confused in my last days, and I was so afraid of what was happening to me." Roderick felt tears burn his eyes as he continued reading. "There is something you need to know about the woman who introduced herself as my friend Isabella. I started to suspect her a few months ago. The teas she brought, the supplements she insisted I take, everything started to make me feel worse instead of better. When I finally researched her, I discovered terrible things. She is not who she says she is. Her real name is Leticia Davies, and she worked in hospitals where people passed away under suspicious circumstances." The letter continued, detailing Helen's discoveries, her attempts to confront Leticia, and the growing fear that she was being slowly poisoned. She had hired a private investigator, gathered evidence, documented everything in the hope of being able to hand it over to the authorities. But then came the paragraph that made Roderick's world stop completely. "There is another truth I need to tell you, my love, a truth about Sophie. She is not biologically your daughter, but that has never ever diminished your love for her, and I know it won't change anything. Sophie is the daughter of Dr. Henry Taylor, the doctor who helped me when I needed it most before I met you. It was a difficult time in my life, and when I discovered the pregnancy, Henry had already moved abroad. When I met you, you accepted me completely, accepted Sophie as your own, and we built a beautiful family. I am telling you this now because Leticia found out and may try to use it against you. But know that Sophie is your daughter in every way that truly matters, and she needs you now more than ever. Please protect our girl. Don't let that woman get near her. I love you forever. Helen." Roderick let the letter fall into his lap, tears finally streaming freely down his face. Sophie was not his biological daughter. All those years Helen had kept this secret, and now he understood why. She wanted to protect everyone, to protect the love they had built together. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter one bit. Sophie was his daughter. She was the child he had rocked when she cried, whom he had taught to read, whom he had comforted when she missed her mother. Biology changed none of that, but Patricia knew, and she was planning to use it somehow. He quickly gathered all the documents in the folder, including the evidence Helen had collected about Leticia. There were photos of her entering and leaving hospitals, records of suspicious purchases of medications, even transcripts of conversations that the private investigator had managed to record. Helen had been so careful, so brave, and he hadn't realized how much she had been fighting alone. As he left the bank, his phone rang, again. It was a call from Patricia. He answered, keeping his voice firm. "What do you want?" "Ah, Roderick. I see you finally went to the bank. Did you read Helen's letter?" Her voice was sweet as poisoned honey. "So now you know the truth about your precious Sophie. I know she is my daughter, and I know what you did to Helen." There was a pause, and then Patricia laughed. It wasn't a nervous or defensive laugh, it was cold and calculated. "You have no proof of anything, and even if you did, you won't want this to go public, will you? Think of the scandal. The great Roderick Alistair raising another man's daughter without knowing. The press will love it. Your business partners will question your judgment. And as for Sophie, poor dear, imagine discovering that the father she loves so much isn't really her father. You are despicable. I am practical, and I'm going to make you a very simple offer, Roderick. You transfer a sum I consider fair for my discretion, say £20 million, and I disappear from your life. You'll never see or hear from me again. Refuse the offer, and not only will I make public the truth about Sophie, but I also have some very interesting documents about your financial transactions that might interest HMRC. Documents that show irregularities you didn't even know existed because I created them so well." Roderick gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm being a businesswoman. Think of it as an investment in your peace of mind and your family's reputation. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, things will get much more complicated for you." She hung up before he could respond. Roderick stood on the pavement in front of the bank, the folder of documents clutched to his chest, feeling the weight of everything collapsing on him. But then, through the anger and despair, a spark of determination began to grow. Patricia had underestimated two things. First, how much he loved Sophie and was willing to do to protect her. And second, the fact that he was no longer alone in this fight. He had the evidence Helen had gathered. He had the recordings Sophie had made. He had Philip investigating Patricia's every move, and now he had a plan beginning to form in his mind. If Patricia wanted to play dirty, he was going to show her that she was entering a battle she couldn't win. Not when he was fighting against a father determined to protect his daughter and honor the memory of the woman he loved. The war was just beginning, and Roderick was ready to fight to the end. Night fell over London with its cloak of lights and shadows, but inside the mansion in Belgravia, a silent meeting was underway. Roderick had summoned Philip and two of his trusted investigators, and now everyone was gathered in the office, surrounded by documents, tablets, and computers displaying information about Letitia Davies, also known as Patricia. Sophie was in her room with Marion, but had insisted on participating via a tablet connected to the meeting. Roderick initially hesitated, wanting to shield his daughter from disturbing details, but she had argued with impressive maturity that she was a fundamental part of it all and deserved to be involved in decisions that affected her safety. "All right," Philip began, pointing to the large screen he had installed on the wall. "After intensive investigation over the last 12 hours, we've managed to put together a complete profile of our suspect. Letitia Davies is 36 years old, born in Nottingham, and graduated as a nurse 15 years ago. She worked in 4 different hospitals, being dismissed from 3 of them under suspicious circumstances." One of the investigators, Carla Miller, a 40-year-old woman with black hair pulled back in a severe bun, continued the presentation. At St. Jude's Hospital, in 2015, 3 patients under her care experienced unexpected complications that led to their demise. Officially, they were recorded as natural complications of pre-existing conditions. At St. Luke's Hospital in 2017, a similar situation. 5 cases in 8 months. And at Victoria Cross Hospital in 2019, 4 more cases before she was quietly removed. Roderick felt nauseous as he absorbed the information. This woman was a serial predator, and Helen had been just another victim in a long list. "We also managed to identify," Carla continued, "an interesting pattern. In all cases, the victims had wealthy families, and in at least 3 cases, there were attempts to approach the family members after the deaths. One of these attempts resulted in a brief relationship with a millionaire widower, which ended when he began to suspect inconsistencies in her story." "Does she have an accomplice?" Roderick asked. Philip nodded affirmatively. "Yes, we identified a man named Richard Foster, 42 years old, a former paramedic with a history of drug problems and gambling debts. We believe he is coerced by Letitia in some way. He was seen with her on 2 different occasions in recent months, and our sources indicate that he may be involved in forging documents and creating the evidence she threatened to use against you." From the tablet, Sophie's voice was heard, surprisingly calm and analytical. "I saw this man. He came here a few times, when Daddy wasn't around. She said he was a technician coming to fix things, but they always talked quietly in the living room." Everyone looked at the screen where Sophie's serious face appeared. The girl continued. "And there's something else. The house security system records everything, but she didn't quite know how it worked. She thought it only recorded when the alarms were activated, but it actually records all the time. I saw Daddy setting it up once and asked him how it worked. He explained everything to me." Roderick felt a mixture of pride and sadness. His 8-year-old daughter had been more observant and careful than he himself in his own home. "Sophie is right," Philip confirmed. "I'm already reviewing all the security footage from the last 2 years. It will take time, but if Letitia and Richard discuss their plans here, we have a record of everything." "How much time do we have before her deadline?" Carla asked. Roderick looked at his watch. 18 hours. She wants an answer by 6 tomorrow afternoon. "That's not enough time to build a full criminal case," Philip admitted, "but it might be enough time to make her incriminate herself." "How?" Roderick leaned forward, interested. "People like Letitia have a weak point: arrogance. She thinks she's in control, that she's smarter than everyone else. If we can create a situation where she feels confident enough to confess her crimes, we can record her and use that as evidence." From the tablet, Sophie spoke again. "I have an idea." Everyone turned to the screen. The girl continued, her voice showing a sharp intelligence that belied her young age. "She thinks I'm just a scared child who doesn't understand what's happening. But I understand everything, and she doesn't know about the recordings I made, or that Daddy found out everything about her. If we lured her to a place where she felt safe, where she thought she had an advantage, maybe she would talk too much." "It's risky to involve Sophie in this," Roderick immediately protested. "Daddy, I'm already involved. She already hurt me. She already planned worse things. And I want to help get justice for Mummy." Sophie's voice was firm, without a trace of fear. "I'm smart. I can do this." Philip looked at Roderick with a thoughtful expression. "The girl is right. Letitia completely underestimates Sophie. That could be our advantage. But where? And how do we ensure her safety?" Roderick was torn between pride in his daughter's courage and terror at putting her in danger. "There's a place," Carla suggested. "The Royal Memorial Hospital where Helen spent her last days. Letitia worked there briefly as Isabella Shaw. It's territory she knows, where she would feel confident. We can arrange a meeting there, in a controlled area, with undercover agents in strategic positions." Sophie agreed through the screen. She'd like that. She'd feel powerful going back to the place where she managed to fool everyone. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, planning every detail. Philip would contact a trusted inspector, someone who could coordinate a discreet operation. Carla would work with the hospital administration to ensure access to the necessary areas and install recording equipment. And Roderick would be the bait, agreeing to the meeting but insisting that Sophie be present, arguing that he wanted his daughter to hear the truth directly. When everyone finally dispersed to work on their assignments, Roderick went up to Sophie's room. The girl was sitting on her bed, hugging her stuffed rabbit, but her eyes were alert and determined. "Are you sure about this?" "My love," he asked, sitting beside her, "you don't have to do anything that scares you." "I'm sure, Daddy. Mummy was brave. She investigated that woman even when she was sick, even when she was scared. I want to be brave like her." Roderick hugged her tightly, feeling tears burn his eyes. "You are already brave, braver than I could ever imagine, and your mother would be so proud of you." "Daddy," Sophie said after a moment, her voice softening, "I read Mummy's letter. Marion helped me understand some parts about Dr. Henry, about you not being my biological father." Roderick pulled back to look into her eyes, his heart aching. "Sophie, It doesn't matter," she interrupted him, placing her small hand on his face. "You are my daddy. You always have been. You always will be. Mummy said that in the letter, and she was right. Family isn't just about blood, it's about love. And you love me, I know that." "I love you more than anything in this world," he said, his voice choked. "You are my daughter, Sophie, in every way that truly matters." She smiled, and in that smile Roderick saw so much of Helen that his heart almost burst with love and longing. "So let's do this together. Let's get justice for Mummy and make sure that woman never hurts anyone again." The next morning, Roderick called Patricia from the number she had used to contact him. She answered on the second ring, her voice exuding confidence. "Roderick, I hope you've thought carefully about my proposal." "I have, and I agree to pay what you're asking. But I have one condition." There was a brief pause. "What condition?" "I want a personal meeting. You, me, and Sophie. I want my daughter to hear, directly from you, that you will disappear from our lives. She deserves that closure after everything she's been through." Patricia laughed. "You want to bring the girl?" "Roderick, I don't know if that's a good idea. It's my condition. Without it, no money. And Sophie deserves to hear your apologies for what you did to her." He could almost hear the calculations happening in her mind. Finally, she replied, "All right, but in a neutral place. A place public enough for there to be no tricks, but private enough for our conversation. I have a place in mind, the Royal Memorial Hospital. There's a conference room on the 3rd floor that we used to use for meetings with doctors when Helen was hospitalized. It's private, but within a busy environment, and it has meaning for all of us." Another pause. Roderick held his breath, waiting, He was betting on Patricia's arrogance, on her confidence that she had complete control of the situation. "Royal Memorial Hospital," she finally said, and he detected satisfaction in her voice. "How poetic. Yes, I accept. This afternoon, 4 o'clock. And Roderick, don't try anything stupid. You don't want those documents I mentioned to fall into the wrong hands." "I won't try anything. I just want to resolve this and move on." "Excellent. See you soon." After she hung up, Roderick immediately called Philip. She accepted. 4 o'clock at the memorial. "Perfect. I'm already coordinating with Inspector Davies. He's discreet and efficient. We'll have undercover agents throughout the 3rd floor, long-range microphones, and hidden video equipment. Everything she says will be recorded and admissible in court." The hours until the meeting passed in a blur of preparations. Philip reviewed the plan multiple times with Roderick and Sophie, ensuring that both knew exactly what to do and say. Inspector Davies, a 50-year-old man with decades of experience in complex cases, ensured his team was ready. Sophie was surprisingly calm. She chose comfortable clothes, tied her hair in a ponytail, and held her tablet like a shield. Roderick knew she had loaded all the recordings she had made, ready to present them if necessary. At 3:30, they arrived at the Royal Memorial Hospital. The tall, modern building in Kensington brought back painful memories, but Roderick pushed them to the back of his mind. He needed to be focused. Inspector Davies met them discreetly in a side corridor. "Everything's ready. We have 8 agents positioned. 4 are disguised as hospital staff, 2 as visitors, and 2 in an adjacent room monitoring the recording equipment. She won't notice anything." "And what about her accomplice, Richard Foster?" Roderick asked. "We have a team tracking him. If he shows up here, we'll arrest him immediately." Roderick nodded, then knelt to be at Sophie's height. "Are you still sure about this, honey?" "I am, Daddy. Let's finish this." The conference room was exactly as Roderick remembered it. A long, dark wooden table, upholstered chairs, large windows offering a view of the city. He and Sophie sat on one side of the table and waited. Patricia arrived exactly at 4 o'clock. She entered the room wearing an elegant suit, her hair perfectly styled, impeccable makeup. She looked every inch the sophisticated and successful woman she had always pretended to be. But when her eyes met Roderick's, he saw the predator behind the mask. Roderick. Sophie. She greeted them both with a nod, then sat down on the other side of the table. "I see you've decided to be sensible. I came to negotiate as you asked." Roderick kept his voice firm, emotionless. "Excellent. Did you bring the transfer documentation?" "I did. But first, as I said, I want you to talk to Sophie. Explain to her why you did what you did. She deserves to understand." Patricia looked at Sophie with an expression that tried to appear remorseful, but couldn't completely hide the disdain. "Sophie, dear, I'm sorry if I was hard on you sometimes. But you understand it's difficult to enter an already formed family, to try to fill the place of someone who was so loved." "You didn't try to fill my mother's place," Sophie said calmly, her voice surprisingly firm. "You tried to erase her, and erase me too." Patricia blinked, momentarily disconcerted by the direct response. "You don't understand, child. The adult world is complicated." "I understand more than you think," Sophie retorted. "I understand, for example, that your name was Letitia Davies before you were called Patricia, and that your name was Isabella Shaw when you met my mother." Patricia's face paled slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "Roderick, what are you doing? This wasn't the agreement." "The agreement was an honest conversation," Roderick replied. "So let's be honest. You are not who you say you are. You infiltrated my family with a purpose, and I want to hear from your own mouth what that purpose was. Are you recording this? Is someone listening?" Patricia looked around the room, tension appearing in her shoulders. "It's just the 3 of us. But Sophie deserves to know the truth, all of it, about what you did to Helen, about your plans, about everything." Patricia stood up abruptly, walking to the window. For a long moment she stood in silence, looking out at the city. When she finally turned, there was a change in her expression. The mask had completely fallen. "All right," she said, her voice now cold and calculated. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. But after this, there's no more negotiation. Either you pay what I asked, or I destroy everything you've built." She returned to the table, but did not sit down. Instead, she stood, her hands resting on the wooden surface, leaning towards them. "I met Helen 4 years ago. Not by chance, but because I chose her. I chose her. I chose you. I chose this family. You had everything I deserved to have: money, status, a comfortable life, and I had worked hard for years, cleaning up other people's messes in hospitals, taking care of ungrateful people who didn't deserve my attention." "You were a nurse," Roderick said. "It was your job to take care of people." "It was my job to be exploited," she spat, "working endless hours for pennies while wealthy families like yours squandered money. So I decided I deserved a share of it, and I found it was very easy to help certain people pass away faster. People who were already sick, already suffering. I just accelerated the process." Sophie squeezed Roderick's hand under the table, but her expression remained courageous. Patricia continued, her voice gaining an almost proud quality. "Helen was perfect. She already had a delicate condition. She was already frail. It was easy to approach her in the support group, gain her trust. And then I started adding little things to the teas I brought, to the supplements I suggested. Nothing too obvious, just enough to accelerate the deterioration. The doctors never suspected. How could they? I knew exactly what to do to make it seem natural." "You poisoned her," Roderick said, his voice trembling with contained rage. "You deliberately took her life." "I freed her from suffering," Patricia corrected with a cold smile, "and opened the way for myself. The plan was perfect. Wait a respectable time, reappear in your life as another person, win you over, marry, and eventually secure my access to the assets. And it would have worked perfectly if it weren't for this annoying child." She looked at Sophie with pure contempt. "You were an obstacle from the beginning, always watching, always reminding your father of St. Helen. I tried to make him give up on you, talk about the difficulties, the expenses, the work involved in caring for a child with special needs, but he never agreed, so I would have to solve the problem another way." "You were going to hurt me," Sophie said, her voice small but firm. "You were going to make it look like an accident." "It would be so easy," Patricia casually confirmed. "A child with mobility difficulties, an unfortunate fall down the stairs, or perhaps a drowning in the pool. Accidents happen all the time. And without you in the way, Roderick would eventually have given me full control over the finances, especially when I revealed that you weren't even his real daughter." Roderick stood up, unable to remain seated. "You are monstrous." "I am practical," she retorted. "And now you know the whole truth. Satisfied? Because now we're going to talk business. 20 million transferred today, and I disappear. Or I send copies of all the fake documents I created about your supposed tax frauds to HMRC, to your business partners, to the media. Your choice." From Sophie's pocket, a small beep sounded. The girl took out her tablet and placed it on the table, turning the screen so Patricia could see. "You know what's funny?" Sophie said, her voice gaining surprising strength. "You think you're so smart, but I recorded everything you just said, and that's not all." She tapped the screen, and one of the old recordings began to play, Patricia's voice discussing her plans on the phone echoing through the room. Then another recording, and another, each one more incriminating than the last. Patricia's face underwent a complete transformation. First shock, then anger, then something approaching panic. You can't use that. It's illegal to record without consent. It's worth nothing in court." "Actually," a male voice said from the door, "it is valid when there is suspicion of a serious crime." Inspector Davies entered the room, followed by 2 uniformed officers. He showed his badge to Patricia. "Letitia Davies, you are under arrest on suspicion of multiple serious charges. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Patricia recoiled, looking frantically around the room like a cornered animal. "You can't prove anything. You have no physical evidence." "Actually, we do," Philip said. entering the room right after the inspector. He held a thick folder. "We found records of your purchases of specific chemical substances, tracked your bank movements to accounts under false names, and we have witnesses from the hospitals where you worked, willing to talk about their suspicions. Combined with your recorded confession just now, and with the testimonies of Mrs. Marion and other staff about your behavior with Sophie, we have a solid case." "And there's more," Carla added, also entering. "Richard Foster was arrested an hour ago. He is cooperating completely, telling everything about how you coerced him into creating false documents and helping you with your schemes. It seems you also had blackmail material against him related to a suspicious hospital fire years ago." Patricia seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of minutes. All the confidence, all the arrogance had evaporated, leaving only despair and rage. "You set this whole thing up," she accused, looking at Roderick and Sophie. "It was all a trap." "It was justice," Roderick corrected calmly. "Justice for Helen, for Sophie, and for all the other victims you left along the way." As the officers handcuffed Patricia and led her out, she cast one last venomous look at Sophie. "You'll grow up without a mother. You'll grow up knowing that your own father isn't really your father. You'll carry that forever." But Sophie, instead of recoiling or crying, looked directly at her and said with impressive clarity, "I will grow up knowing that I had a mother who loved me so much that she fought to protect me even when she was sick, and that I have a father who chooses me every day not by blood but by love. That's more than you'll ever understand." The words hung in the air as Patricia was escorted out. When the door finally closed, Roderick picked Sophie up in his arms and hugged her tightly, feeling tears finally stream freely down his face. "You were so brave," he whispered, "so incredibly brave." "We were brave," she corrected, hugging him back. "Together." Inspector Davies approached them, his expression grave but satisfied. "You did the right thing. Her confession, combined with all the other evidence, will ensure she remains imprisoned for a long time, and we will reopen investigations into all suspicious cases at the hospitals where she worked. Thanks to you, many families can finally have answers." In the weeks that followed, the investigation expanded. It was discovered that Letitia had been involved in at least 12 suspicious situations over the years, always targeting patients from wealthy families, always leaving a trail too faint to follow until now. Richard Foster, in exchange for a reduced sentence, provided details on how Letitia had coerced him since an incident years ago, and how he had been forced to help her create false identities and forge documents. The trial was long and painful, but in the end, Letitia Davies was sentenced to a significant prison term. The judge, in pronouncing the sentence, specifically mentioned Sophie's courage in helping bring a dangerous criminal to justice. But for Roderick and Sophie, the true healing was just beginning. They had faced the darkness and emerged together stronger than ever, and there was still one last chapter to be written, one of rebuilding, hope, and new beginnings. 6 months had passed since that day at the Royal Memorial Hospital. 6 months of therapy, of rebuilding, of slowly learning to breathe again without the constant weight of fear and pain. Spring had arrived in London, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to perfectly echo the moment Roderick and Sophie were living. The mansion in Belgravia had undergone subtle but significant changes. The heavy curtains had been replaced by lighter fabrics that allowed generous sunlight to enter. New paintings decorated the walls, some painted by Sophie herself during her art therapy sessions. The garden, once impeccably formal, now had a special corner that was being transformed into something very special for the girl. Roderick was in the office, but no longer surrounded by business documents. Instead, there were plants scattered across the desk, catalogues of flowers and butterflies, and colourful drawings made by Sophie showing her vision for the memorial garden they were creating together in tribute to Helen. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Marion bringing tea and her usual warm smile. "Mr. Alistair, Dr. Henry has arrived. He's in the living room with Sophie." Roderick felt a mixture of emotions upon hearing the name. Henry Taylor had entered their lives 3 months ago in a completely unexpected way. After the trial, when all the dust had begun to settle, Roderick decided it was time to seek out the man Helen had mentioned in her letter. Henry Taylor, Sophie's biological father, the doctor who had been in Helen's life before Roderick appeared. Finding him was not difficult. Henry was working at a hospital in Edinburgh, specializing in pediatric orthopedics. When Roderick finally made contact, explaining who he was and what had happened, Henry's reaction was one of absolute shock, followed by deep sadness. He had not known of Sophie's existence. Helen had never managed to contact him before meeting Roderick, and when she finally tried, years later, Henry had already moved and lost contact. He never knew he had a daughter. The first meeting between Henry and Sophie had been carefully planned, with Sophie's therapist present to help navigate the complex emotions. Roderick had prepared Sophie, weeks beforehand, gently explaining about Henry, about how he hadn't abandoned her but simply hadn't known of her existence. To everyone's surprise, Sophie had reacted with curiosity rather than anger or confusion. She had questions, many questions, but also an impressive maturity to understand that complicated situations had complicated stories. Henry was a 45-year-old man, with brown hair streaked with grey at the temples, kind eyes that immediately reminded Roderick of Sophie. When he saw the girl for the first time, tears streamed freely down his face. He knelt to her height and said simply, "Hi, Sophie. I'm sorry, I wasn't here before, but if you'll allow me, I'd love to get to know you." And Sophie, with that wisdom that sometimes seemed far beyond her 8 years, had replied, "I already have a daddy, the best daddy in the world, but I think there's always room for one more person who loves me." In the following months, Henry became a constant but respectful presence in their lives. He had moved to London, accepting a position at a leading hospital, partly to be near Sophie, partly because Roderick suggested that his expertise could help his daughter. Sophie had undergone several surgeries over the years to help with her mobility, but Henry, with his specialized knowledge in pediatric orthopedics, saw possibilities that other doctors had not considered. He proposed a new treatment, a combination of intensive physiotherapy and minor procedures that could significantly improve her quality of life. Roderick went downstairs and found Henry and Sophie in the living room, surrounded by papers and laptops. They were working together on a project Sophie had conceptualized, a support program for children who had suffered abuse or neglect. "Daddy!" Sophie exclaimed when she saw him, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She still used crutches, but her posture was more confident, her movements more fluid thanks to the new physiotherapy program. "Dr. Henry got in touch with that foundation I told you about. They want to hear our proposal." Roderick smiled, feeling pride flood his chest. "That's wonderful, honey. Tell me more." Henry stood up, extending his hand to Roderick in a handshake that had become familiar and comfortable over the months. There was a mutual respect between the two men, a tacit understanding that both loved Sophie and wanted the best for her. "Sophie had a brilliant idea," Henry explained. "She wants to create a series of children's books telling stories about children facing difficulties, but always with messages of hope and overcoming. And along with the books, develop a psychological support and mentoring program for vulnerable children." "And there's more," Sophie added, almost jumping with excitement. "I want part of the profits from the books to go towards funding medical treatments for children who need them but can't afford them, like physiotherapy, psychological therapy, those kinds of things." Roderick sat beside his daughter, putting his arm around her shoulders. "When did you get so wise and so generous?" "I learned from Mummy, and from you, Daddy." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Mummy always said that when we go through difficult things, we can choose to be bitter, or we can choose to use it to help other people. I want to help." At that moment, Marion appeared at the door again. "Mr. Alistair, the landscaper has arrived. She's waiting in the garden." "Oh, the garden!" Sophie became even more excited. "Come on, Daddy, Dr. Henry. I want to show you how it's turning out." The three went out to the back garden, where an impressive transformation was taking place. What was once a formal and rigid garden was becoming a magical space, full of colorful flowers, plants that attracted butterflies, and small stone paths that Sophie could easily navigate with her crutches. The landscaper, a woman named Julia, with an evident passion for her work, stood beside several seedlings and plants. "Sophie, I brought the flowers you asked for. Look, these ones are special because monarch butterflies love them." Sophie approached carefully, gently touching the petals. "They're beautiful. Mummy would love them." "She certainly would," Roderick agreed, feeling the familiar pang of longing now mixed with something softer, more like gratitude for having had Helen in his life, even if for a short time. "And over there," Julia pointed to a corner of the garden where a delicate structure was being installed, "we're going to put the memorial bench. It will be a perfect place for you to sit and watch the butterflies." The bench had been Sophie's idea. She wanted a special place where she could sit and talk to her mother, where she could remember the good times and feel that Helen was still somehow present. Henry, observing everything with an emotional expression, approached Roderick. "You've done an incredible job with her. Helen would be very proud." "Helen did the hardest work," Roderick replied. "She gave Sophie the foundations, the values, the strength. I'm just trying to continue what she started." "You're a good man, Roderick, and an exceptional father." Henry hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I just wanted to thank you for letting me be a part of her life. I know it wasn't easy, and you had no obligation to accept me here. Sophie deserves to know all the people who love her, and you clearly love her." Roderick looked at the other man with sincerity. "Besides, your help with her medical treatments has been invaluable. She's progressing in ways I didn't think possible. She's determined and resilient, characteristics she certainly inherited from Helen." Henry smiled. "And the stubbornness probably came from you." Roderick laughed, a light and genuine sound that had become more frequent in recent months. "Probably." The following weeks were filled with preparations. Sophie worked on her drawings for the books, with the help of a professional illustrator Roderick had hired. The girl spent hours creating characters and stories, each based on some aspect of her own journey, but always with a message of hope. Roderick, in turn, had made significant changes in his professional life. He promoted trusted people to leadership positions in his company, allowing him to work fewer hours and spend more time with Sophie. He discovered that financial success, while important, meant very little if he missed precious moments with his daughter. Philip continued as head of security, but now he was also a close family friend, often showing up for dinners and sharing stories that made Sophie laugh. Marian had become more than a housekeeper. She was practically part of the family, an adopted grandmother for Sophie, who cooked her favorite dishes and always had a comforting hug when needed. Letitia's trial had become a prominent media case, exposing not only her crimes, but also raising important questions about hospital security and the need for better background checks for healthcare professionals. Several families of previous victims had contacted Roderick, thanking him for finally having answers and justice. One afternoon, while Sophie rested after a physiotherapy session, Roderick was in his office when he received an unexpected call. It was a journalist from a major magazine wanting to do a story about Sophie's journey and her project to help other children. Initially, his instinct was to refuse. Sophie had already been through so much, and the last thing he wanted was to expose her to more public attention. But when he talked to his daughter about it, she surprised him once again. "Daddy, if telling our story can help other children feel less alone, or help other parents pay more attention, then I think it's worth it. Mummy always said that our pain doesn't have to be wasted. We can turn it into something that helps other people." And so, a few weeks later, they sat down for a carefully conducted interview where Sophie, with impressive maturity, spoke about her journey. She didn't go into graphic details about the abuse, but spoke about the importance of children trusting their instincts, speaking up when something is wrong, and understanding that they are not alone. The article, when published, had a huge impact. Letters began to arrive from all over the UK, from children who identified with Sophie's story, from parents who noticed signs they had ignored, from professionals wanting to support the project she was developing. One particular letter deeply touched Roderick's heart. It was from a 10-year-old girl named Isabella, who wrote, "Dear Sophie, I also use crutches and have also been through bad things, but your story showed me that I can be strong and that I can help other people even as a child. You are my hero. Thank you for being brave." Sophie read the letter with tears in her eyes, and that night She and Roderick spent hours personally replying to every message they had received. The butterfly garden was finally completed on a sunny October day. Roderick had invited the family's closest people for a small inauguration ceremony: Marion, Philip, Henry, Carla, Inspector Davies, and some close friends of Helen, who had drifted away after her passing but now returned, wanting to honor her memory. In the center of the garden, next to the memorial bench, there was a bronze plaque with an inscription Sophie had chosen: Helen Alistair, Mother, Wife, Warrior, your light continues to shine through the love you left behind. Sophie, wearing a yellow dress that Helen loved to see her wear, stood before the plaque with Roderick by her side. She held a paper butterfly she had made, colorful and delicate. "Mummy," she began, her voice clear despite the tears streaming down. "I know you're not here anymore in a way I can see and touch, but I feel you every day. I feel you when Daddy hugs me. I feel you when Dr. Henry helps me with my exercises. I feel you when Marion makes that cake you loved. And now in this garden I'll feel you in every butterfly that flies through here." She paused, wiping her tears. "You were very brave, Mummy. Even when you were sick and scared, you fought to protect us. You left clues, wrote that letter, gathered evidence, all so we would be safe. And we were. The bad person who hurt you won't hurt anyone anymore. You managed to save us, even after you passed." Roderick placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder, giving support. Sophie continued, "I promise I will use everything you taught me to help other children. I will write stories, I will create the support program, I will do everything I can so that no child feels alone or scared like I did. And I will make you proud of me. Always." She released the paper butterfly, which was carried by a gentle breeze, dancing through the air before landing softly near the flowers. And as if it were a sign, a real monarch butterfly appeared, fluttering around the garden in graceful circles before landing exactly on the same flower where the paper butterfly had landed. A murmur of surprise and admiration passed through those present. Marion wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Philip discreetly wiped his eyes. Henry placed a hand on his heart, clearly moved, and Roderick simply hugged Sophie, watching the butterfly and feeling for the first time since Helen's loss a complete sense of peace. In the months that followed, life found a new rhythm. Sophie's first book was published, a beautiful story about a girl named Luna who used magical crutches that could take her to extraordinary places. The book was an immediate success, not only among children facing similar challenges, but among all children who needed a message of hope and courage. The foundation Sophie had dreamed of creating became a reality, with Roderick providing the initial funding and a team of dedicated professionals helping to structure the programs. They started small, helping a few families in London, but quickly expanded, reaching children throughout the country and eventually across the UK. Henry became an integral part of the family, not replacing Roderick but complementing him. He was present at birthdays, school parties, important milestones, and Sophie, with her great capacity for love, had learned that family was not about who shared her DNA, but about who chose to be present, who chose to love and support unconditionally. Therapy continued to be an important part of Sophie's routine. Her therapist, Dr. Beatrice, had been fundamental in helping her process the trauma, understand that what happened was not her fault, and develop tools to cope with difficult moments when memories returned. There were bad days, of course, days when Sophie woke up from nightmares, days when the anger and sadness over her mother's loss seemed overwhelming. But on those days, she had a solid support network. She had Roderick, who dropped everything to be with her. She had Marion, who hugged her and let her cry. She had Henry, who helped her channel emotions through therapeutic physical activities. And she had the butterfly garden, her sacred space where she could connect with her mother's memory. 1 year after that terrible day when it all began, Roderick and Sophie were sitting together on the memorial bench, watching the butterflies dance among the flowers. The garden was in full bloom, a spectacle of colors and life. "Daddy," Sophie said softly, "do you think Mummy knows? About everything that happened, about the foundation, about the books, about how well we're doing now?" Roderick thought carefully before answering. "I think that wherever your mother is, she is proud Proud of you for your courage, your kindness, your strength. Proud of us for having fought and found a way back to the light. I still miss her every day. Me too, honey. And it's okay to miss her. She was special, and the love we had for her doesn't disappear just because she's gone. But look at what we've built from that pain. Look at how many children we're helping. Look at how you've transformed your experience into something that brings hope to other people. Sophie nodded, watching a monarch butterfly land on her outstretched hand. You know what I learned, Daddy? I learned that bad things happen sometimes. Bad people exist. But I also learned that good things can come from bad things. And that family isn't about being perfect or never having problems. It's about being together, about supporting each other, about choosing every day to love and care for one another. Roderick kissed the top of her head, his heart so full of love it felt like it could burst. When did you get so wise? Always have been, she replied with a mischievous smile that was pure Helen. You're just starting to notice. They laughed together, the sound echoing through the garden, mingling with the hum of bees and the rustle of butterfly wings. And in that moment, sitting together in their special garden, surrounded by the beauty they had created from pain, Roderick felt that they had finally found their way home. It wasn't the same home they had before. It couldn't be, not after everything they had been through. But it was a home rebuilt on stronger foundations, cemented by truth, courage, and a love that had been tested and had survived. The following years brought more growth and healing. Sophie continued writing books, each exploring different aspects of the childhood experience with sensitivity and hope. She became a voice for children facing difficulties, not just those with physical disabilities, but all children who felt invisible or helpless. The foundation expanded, its programs offering not only psychological support, but also scholarships, mentoring programs, and medical assistance for families who couldn't afford it. Roderick had discovered that his true calling was not just to make money, but to use his resources to make a real difference in people's lives. Henry became an additional father figure in Sophie's life, but always with respect for Roderick's role. They formed a modern and loving family, proving that family could take many different forms, and that what mattered was love, not traditional structure. Marion, now officially retired but refusing to completely leave the family's life, divided her time between her own family and frequent visits to the mansion, where she was always greeted with warm hugs and gratitude. Philip eventually married Carla, the investigator, and they became part of the family's inner circle, often attending dinners and celebrations. And through it all, the butterfly garden remained a constant reminder. A reminder of Helen, of course, but also a reminder of transformation. Just as a caterpillar undergoes a painful metamorphosis to become a butterfly, so they had undergone their own transformation, emerging stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Sophie never forgot the dark days when she lived in fear, when she didn't know if anyone would come to save her. But she also never forgot the fundamental lesson that experience had taught her, that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. That courage doesn't mean not being afraid, but continuing despite it, and that true love, family love, can survive any storm. On a warm summer afternoon, several years later, Sophie was in the garden giving an interview for a documentary about her foundation. She was 15 now, a confident teenager who still used crutches, but who saw them not as a limitation but as part of who she was. What message would you like to leave for other children who are going through difficult situations? The interviewer asked. Sophie thought for a moment, looking at the garden that had become so special to her, then replied with conviction. I would say that your story doesn't end in the difficult chapter. There are always more pages to write. And even if you can't control what happens to you, you can control how you respond, how you grow, how you transform your pain into something that helps other people. You are stronger than you imagine. You are braver than you think. And you are never ever alone. As the cameras stopped recording and the crew began to pack up the equipment, Roderick watched his daughter from afar, talking animatedly with the crew, making everyone laugh with her stories. He thought of Helen, of how she would have loved to see the person Sophie was becoming. A monarch butterfly landed on his shoulder, and he smiled, feeling as if it were a message from her, a nod of approval from beyond. "We did it, Helen," he whispered to the wind. "Our girl is well, more than well. She is thriving, and she is changing the world one heart at a time." The butterfly flew off, dancing through the garden in graceful spirals, and Roderick went back inside the house, ready to continue the journey, a journey that had begun with pain and darkness, but had transformed into something beautiful, a journey of love, of family, of healing, and of hope. And in the garden, the butterflies continued their eternal dance, a constant reminder that from the greatest darkness can emerge the most extraordinary light. That transformation is possible, that love perseveres, and that, in the end, that's what matters. The ability to love, to forgive, to grow, and to turn our scars into wings that allow us to fly. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Roderick and Sophie's story has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of courage, love, and overcoming, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and show that, even in the most difficult situations, love and hope can prevail. Share this story with someone who needs to hear a message of strength and renewal. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with more stories that will touch your soul and make you believe in the transformative power of true love.